welcome back. We're back here at Lancaster University. So, quick recap, I'm Jess. We've got Jacqueline in the background who's going to be posting some comments and some links, so do keep a lookout for those. And we're sat here today with Deborah Sutton as part of the History Department, and she's going to answer some of your questions about what it's like to apply for, study, and then what it's like beyond university when looking at history as a subject. So if you do have any questions, do send them in through the comments below. As we have in the past couple of Facebook Lives, we've got a backup of questions here. Do you want to introduce yourself and what your role at the university is? Yeah?
Sure. My name is Dr. Deborah Sutton, and I teach modern South Asian history. So in India, generally speaking, when we say modern, we mean colonial. So I look at Indian history from really the beginnings of European interventions, and my research goes all the way up to the 1950s. So that's my teaching for our students, but I'm also Director of Admissions for the department.
Okay, great. So that means that we've got a lot of knowledge to make the most of. So do send in your questions if it's about that specific subject or the admissions side of things. But we'll just get started with the first questions then. So first up, we have the question: what current research is taking place in your department and how does that impact the course?
There's a very rich research culture in the Department of History. So there's around 28 full-time members of staff, there's research associates, there's a community of PhD students developing their own independent research. So there's an enormous variety, both in terms of chronology and geography, but also there are a variety of different themes. There's people interested in social history, cultural history, the history of films and literature and art. There's people who are interested in the history of war, from the ancient period right up until the Cold War in the 20th century. And it has a sort of, it's indelibly linked to our teaching. So all of our teaching is research-led. So we only teach subjects that we have a research-led engagement with. So particularly for second and third years, there's this very wide choice of courses. There's around 40 optional choices, and students study with us according, and we teach from our research. So we tend to own our own courses.
Okay.
There's no canon in history.
Right.
There's no Shakespeare. There's no element of history that we feel you absolutely have to study. But rather it's a discipline of evidence and argument and analysis.
Right.
And you can develop those skills across a range of different places and times and themes and approaches.
Oh wow, and so you were saying 40 different sort of modules was
in
that?
Second and third year,
okay.
Students choose from.
And are they are all these areas of research, they led individually by different lecturers? How does that tend to work?
Yes, we all own our own courses.
Yeah.
So I have a second year course, which is also, third year students can take it as well, but the majority of students are second years, on Gandhi, the Mahatma Gandhi, and the end of empire in India.
Right.
So only I'll teach that subject in the department. Another colleague teaches Cold War, Global Cold War. Only he's qualified to teach that.
Right.
So these are courses which are entirely conceived of and designed by and taught by a single member of staff.
And they're based on your expertise and your specialisms. So yeah, that's a great chance for students to work closely with sort of leads in that area in a sense. Yeah.
And we encourage our students to take quite bold choices. It's not to stick with the areas of history they're familiar with from school, which can often be quite a narrow range of subjects and themes. So we say to our students, even if you're intimidated, even if you've never studied Indian history before, never studied Russian history before, it's our jobs to make those subjects familiar to you. It's our job to present you with a range of readings and lectures and seminar discussions that give you a sort of a way in to what can be wildly unfamiliar topics and times and places and events. Yeah,
so you can't really be intimidated by that then from moving on from school. And I liked what you said there about nothing in history is canon, meaning that, there isn't a definite thing you need to study. So I'm sure we'll touch upon that a bit later when we're talking about the sort of the transition from studying history at school to university, so that's a good point. I'll put a pin in that. But great, so if you have just joined us, we've just been chatting just a little bit about the research taking place in the history department. So what current research is taking place, and just what kind of topics you might be able to study in this course. But for now we'll move on to our next question. So next up, we have the question, what do exams and assessments look like in the subject?
There are, I suppose, two dominant forms of assessment,
Mhm.
which is the essay, the history essay,
Yeah.
which is the sort of what our students spend their time becoming really, really, really good at doing, is executing an essay of between, essays can go anywhere from about 1,500 words all the way up to 5,000 words, all the way up in their dissertations to 10,000 words. So the majority of courses will require students to write one, if not two essays. We also have a number of courses that are examined. So there is a 2-hour exam or a 3-hour exam at the end of the course. We also have some courses that have open exams, and that's where our students come into the department and physically collect the exam paper, and then they're free to go and work it at home in different parts of the library, and they have between 1 and 3 weeks to formulate a response to that exam. So there's a variety of formats of assessment, and that's something our students know about. So when they pick their courses, if they feel they really don't want to answer, to sit down in a kind of in the theatre of the examination hall and sit lines of desks and sit down for 3 hours, they can take coursework only, assess modules. I would generally encourage students not to carry on the habits of school that students will often come to us and say, well, I hate exams, I'm really terrible at exams, and to think about what exams are designed to do and how exams are assessed, which is rather different from how we read essays.
Yeah.
So exams are a sort of closed, for the most part, those 2 or 3 hour exams is kind of capsules where you are expected to demonstrate as succinctly as possible the knowledge, the understanding that you have gleaned from the course. So they're assessed in rather different ways. We're not looking for quite the same things that we look for in essays.
Yeah.
So it's asking the students to think quite quickly and to express themselves quite coherently. But I would urge students not to be intimidated by exams, but to rather see exams as an opportunity to demonstrate the understanding, the knowledge, the content that they require during the course.
Yeah.
So yes, students can engage and they can look at how the courses are assessed, but I would strongly encourage them to not to be put off anything simply because there's an exam at the end as opposed to coursework.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's a great outlook to be put to our students now who are currently sitting their GCSE and their A-levels. Like, it is sort of demonstrating that skill and that knowledge that they've got. You mentioned things like open exams, and I want to ask the question, how do you think the assessments at university might differ to, say, GCSE or A-level? Because I think open exams, that stands out as something that might be quite different to school.
Different.
Yeah.
I think there's less... You're not always answering preset questions, even with essays. At universities, that questions are not simply an opportunity to sort of drill the students through a set. I mean, I still remember when I was taught history at school, and a strong student was asked to read out his essay, and the teacher put a series of ticks on the board every time he made a kind of key point that was a key sort of fact. So it was probably about something like the causes of the First World War.
Very tick box.
Yes, and that's really not how history works at an advanced university level. It is a discipline of argument, and it's a discipline of analysis and thought. And so the students are encouraged to own their essays, to see the essays or essay writing as an opportunity to formulate, well, first of all, to acquire a great deal of knowledge around a particular subject, but then to explore it in their own way, to approach it in a way that speaks to them. So there's lots of ways of answering a single question. So that would be one distinction. I mean, the development of an authorial voice, not just sort of going through the answer that you know a teacher wants to hear in order to acquire a certain grade, but to really demonstrating or to engaging with the topic and a problem. And reading around it.
And I guess sort of coming out the other side of things, that's looking at how those assessments and how you use those to develop those skills that they can use after university. So that discipline of argument that you're talking about, all those key skills that they'll be getting from these different types of assessment, and that's really key to hear.
History is great for transferable skills. I mean, we know that graduate employers like history graduates because they have a combination of qualities. They know things about the world, they know things about the past, and the conversations that exist between the past and the present, the sense of how the past generated the past, but also the way in which the present sort of claims and argues.
Yeah.
There's no political debate or cultural debate which in some way doesn't cast back into history to sort of found and prove itself, to evidence itself. So history graduates, I think, are almost uniquely able to engage with the sort of fulcrum of political debate, social debate, cultural debate. But there are also these tremendously useful skills of being able to read through and identify very, very quickly salient information in a range of different forms, which is what researching for an essay consists of. The fact that you can assimilate material very quickly, you can identify what's significant, and then you can arrange that significant material in a clear form. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. Graduate employers will need you to do that, and to sort of to communicate, not just in text, but also to communicate.
Great.
Face to face.
And I can definitely think of some students now who are definitely starting those skills of debating and researching. So it's great to know that they can expand that in this subject. Brilliant. So we've talked a little bit about transferable skills as well, which is something I think we might explore a little bit later in some of these questions. But for those of you who have just joined us, we've just been chatting a little bit about what assessments look like in this subject and what kind of things you can expect to get from those assessments, so what kind of skills you can get from that. So if you are watching this after the live event, you can scroll back and find out more about those. From what I can see, Jacqueline's been posting some links in the comments below, so if you'd like to know more about the research carried within the department, you can scroll down and you can just see the lancaster.ac.uk/history link, and that will lead you to everything you need to know about that. Brilliant. So with that in mind, let's move on to the next question. I'm not sure what will come up next. What we have is, are there any work experience opportunities that students can take part in?
Yes. So there's, I suppose, 3 scales of placement opportunity, of work experience opportunity that university has. So the largest is a year-long placement with various types of employers, and that's a paid placement. And that transforms your degree, your history degree, from a 3-year to a 4-year degree. So between 3rd and 4th year, our students can go and spend a year working.
Okay.
Then there's smaller opportunities to spend between terms a summer, and so that would be organised by the faculty, and our students could work with placements that are particularly that fit well with a history degree, with the humanities degree, so working in creative industries with publishers.
Okay.
And then the history department itself has a placement opportunity which is specifically a heritage placement. So instead of one of these top modules that I mentioned, a second-year top module, students can go and work with one of our heritage partners in the region. So it could be an archive, a museum, English Heritage, the National Trust.
Oh, right.
And they would work on a project that heritage partner needed to have done. So it's a selective process. The students are interviewed for it, and then they go and they work with, so for example, at the moment we've got a student working at the Harris Museum in Preston.
Oh, wow.
And it could be research, it could be cataloguing, it could be preparing materials for an exhibition, it could be undertaking research to prepare for an exhibition. So that's something they would just do within the history department.
Okay. And you're talking about that being a selective process. What about for the placement year? So do you have a specific selection of places that students can go, or is that down to them to choose?
Oh, it's all organised by the university.
Okay.
So there's a module, if students chose to apply for the placement year, there's a set of, there's a module that would help prepare them, both for thinking about what that means, is doing a 4-year degree and going out and working for a year, but also they would be supported through the application and selection process.
Great.
And I think so far all students who have sort of seen that preparatory process to a conclusion have then gone on to have secured a placement.
Oh, great. And you're talking about how students would be supported in their application for this, and I know that there were some interviews involved in the heritage kind of placement thing. One thing we've been talking about in the other sessions is sort of the wider university and what careers opportunities there are, and how I know you've got certain things like the Lancaster Award. Do you mind sort of touching up on a few things like that? Sort of what support is there university-wide for students?
So we've got a very, very good career service. So there's a career service that will help when students sort of are formulating a CV to begin to prepare, to go onto the graduate job market, which is fiercely competitive. The career service will do really just very pragmatic help, like helping to prepare a letter of application, helping to prepare a CV, to format a CV, which is surprisingly difficult. It seems like a very straightforward sort of rundown of experience, but actually to create a CV which is easy to read, which is easy to identify, so the person reading it can immediately see what you've done, the transferable skills that's given you, what you can offer. So the career service can help with that. It can do practice interviews, practice psychometric testing. There are also opportunities to gain work experience. So to be, there's the Richardson Institute, for example. There are research centres on campus where students can do internships. There's all sorts of opportunities to be ambassadors for the department. So we have year representatives. So there are students who help us understand the degree from the student's point of view, and help to feed back student experience of any number of aspects of the degree. So how they find the teaching, how they find the arrangement of their week in terms of timetabling, their experience with essays, their experience with library resources. So we have meetings with representatives where they tell us about that.
Oh, great. So they've got a voice in the course.
They can talk to us about any concerns they have. But there's also student ambassadors, very wonderful student ambassadors working with me on admissions activities. So that's an opportunity for them to earn money, but also talk about what they enjoyed, what they're enjoying about their degree with applicants to Lancaster.
Brilliant. And I know a lot of people watching this who have maybe been to an open day, or maybe they've been to events like that. They will have had a chance to meet these student ambassadors, and it's just great to see their side of things, isn't it? Brilliant. Sort of, for any new people who've joined us, we've just been chatting a little bit about what work experience opportunities there are on the course. So we've chatted a bit about specifically in the course itself, but equally what careers opportunities there are in the wider university and what support there is to help you guys once you are here. But I'll give you a break from now on, because we've depended on your voice a lot for now. So one thing I'd like to draw your attention to, just thinking about student ambassadors and stuff, a way you can meet student ambassadors and ask them about their university experience, as well as representatives of whatever department you might choose. And there are some open days coming up. So those dates are in summer, and that's the 29th of June, 13th of July, and then there's 2 in September, that's the 7th and the 14th. So you can find out more about those open days and sign up yourself. Jacqueline's going to put that in the comments box below. But yeah, you can sign up to those open days, and it's your chance to experience the university itself and see if it's something for you, but also your chance just to meet some new people. I know a lot of us are talking about how this is generally a nice day out, even if you maybe don't choose that the university's for you. You've got a chance to sort of see the wider experience, really. Well, how do you think open days are? What's your opinion? Like, do you think they're useful?
I think they're tremendously useful. Even just as you say, you would arrive at Lancaster, which is very much a campus university. It was established as a greenfield site outside of the city, and you arrive and think, campus university isn't for me. I need to be in the city. I need a much more exciting urban experience. So I think it can also help you get a sense of where you can imagine yourself spending 3 years as a student. I think a lot of it's quite instinctive. Yeah, definitely.
And you can only read so much online or in prospectuses. Like you might see that the course is right, maybe ticks all those boxes, but come in here, and as you were saying, it is instinctive, so go in here and experience in the place for yourself and see if that's somewhere where you can fit in. But yeah, that's a good point, that. Brilliant. So we'll get back to the questions after that. The next question we've got coming up is, this one could be quite personal to you. It's quite a broad question. What advice would you give to young people studying their GCSEs who are unsure what they'd like to study in the future?
I would say ask widely for advice. Anyone who you think might be able to talk to you about their own experience, anyone who might be in a position to tell you more generally about what particular choices, what the options that a particular subject choice would lead to. I wouldn't necessarily take anyone's word for it definitively, but just gather as much information as you can about, there are certain careers that would require a set of qualifications and a certain record of attainment. There are others that are much looser. I mean, there's a set of skills and preparatory educational experiences that can vary a great deal more. So I would say get lots and lots of advice. So if you have a career destination in mind, arm yourself with as much information about what the paths are, how narrow and how wide the paths are to that.
What possible routes there could be.
Absolutely. So I would certainly take lots and lots of advice, and maybe read around the subject. Think about, I suppose, in most pragmatic terms, what a career might mean. I mean, my 11-year-old daughter wants to be a vet, which is a very common choice. But I think if you think in much clearer terms about, every type of aspect of that career, and not just the cuddling kittens. The kind of the muckier stuff, the harder stuff, the hours. And I suppose thinking about the personal qualities. I mean, do you love interacting with people? What are the personal qualities you think that you would bring to a particular career? And I suppose be quite realistic about that.
Being realistic, but also thinking about the why there. And it says a lot of that. So, why is it that you want to study that subject, or why is that the career that you're heading for? And I think that'll let you know, where your passion lies in that. That's really interesting. Great. So for any new people who have joined in, we've just been chatting about what advice will be given to students who may be unsure what subjects they'd like to study in the future, or what kind of career paths they might go down. So if you are watching after the live event, you can scroll back and find out more about that. I will say hello to the new people who have joined us. We're sat here today in Lancaster University with Deborah Sutton, who's answering all your questions about what it's like to study history, as well as what it might be like to apply for it, and what it's like for students who graduate from history. So do send in your questions if you do have any. But for now, we'll move on to our next question. So after that, we have, what's the question? What do you look for in a personal statement? And there is a part B to this question, and it is, what sort of activities, reading or opportunities could young people get involved in to know more about the subject or develop their interest in it?
So, a classic question, the personal statement. The personal statement is a really important part of a UCAS application. And I think sometimes the advice that applicants are given is that there is a kind of formula, that these are the elements that have to be there. I would say sort of two things at the outset. I mean, one is what we would look for is absolutely what's called clean copy, meticulously produced text, and no typos, no poorly formulated sentences, grammatically absolutely correct. So yes, that's really important.
Okay.
But on the other hand, what you're doing is expressing you and your involvement with the subject and how you've come to a decision to apply to study history or history and politics at university, and that could be that could be through a variety of different experiences. And so I can remember reading the personal statement that I met the applicant at an applicant visit day, where he'd said he really loved horrible histories, watching horrible histories. And that's an excellent reason. Yes, there's nothing wrong with saying that that there was this sort of encounter with the subject. It could be an amusement park or something, a television program or a novel that sparked your interest. And I think you don't need to feel that that's a pretentious thing to say. I mean, I don't think it is at all. It's honest. I mean, I think if it rings true. And then I suppose you would sort of talk about the subjects that you've studied at school, not on a kind of list, but what you've particularly enjoyed, but also what you've particularly enjoyed about them. So if you've studied the Russian Revolution, well, what is it about political transformation that's interested you? Or what is it about the communication of radical ideologies across a large number of people? So if you think about, well, there's the topic, but what is it that is behind the topic that has really animated your own interest in it? And in terms of the non-academic aspects, because people will also say, well, okay, what are the extracurricular interests that they have? Just be honest. Just, I mean, I would say avoid saying I like watching television, because that's true of all of us.
Not the obvious things then.
But if you read voraciously, if you're interested in reading novels, that's a great thing to say, because nobody can write unless they read. And so say a little bit about the kinds of things you like to read. And then, if you volunteer, if you're interested in heritage, if you like to travel, say those things.
Yeah, and all the things you've mentioned here seem to be ways for people to show their personality in a subject. So things that they're really specifically interested in, which everyone has if they're really passionate about a subject. Brilliant. One follow-up question to that is, what made you interested in the subject? Can you, because you were talking about a student who watched horrible histories and that was what made them, instantly drew them into history. Was there any sort of specific subject to you that drew you into it? Or
that's interesting. I had a very, very, very good history teacher at school who was quite distinct in a host of ways. I didn't then go on to study history originally, so my first degree was in archaeology, and then which I think Indiana Jones did great at.
It's a great choice.
And then I did a master's in science. I went into environmental science, and then finally my PhD is in history. But I think my history teacher had a huge amount to do with it. But I think I thought, I didn't study history. I think archaeology. I decided that was the thing for me. So I arrived at teaching history through quite a kind of circuitous route.
I don't think everyone takes the expected routes though. So,
I think things like serendipity and chance and all these things are very, very important.
Yes, definitely influential. Whilst we've been talking about that, another question has come in. Let's see. So the question is from Rach. Hello, Rach. Can I still study history if there are certain modules on the course I haven't studied before at school?
Yes, and I would say it's really important. What we find is that school curricula, history curricula, there's a huge amount which you can in theory study, but generally speaking what's delivered at schools tends to be quite narrow, and there are opportunities to do the extended, the EPQ, to write an extended project of your own, but very often in terms of teaching it tends to be quite narrow. So we would warmly, enthusiastically encourage our students to use the modules, the variety of modules that we offer as an opportunity to experiment, is to break new ground. And it's our jobs to help you understand unfamiliar and perhaps intimidating subjects. I teach Indian history, which very, very few schools teach any Indian history at all. So it's really important for my subject that students feel comfortable and confident in trying new things. So yes, absolutely.
Great, and I think one thing to mention is that we kind of talked a little bit about this earlier in the live session, where you said, I think across second and third year, there's a choice of like 40 different modules, so you've got such a range of those things that people can, connect to, which is brilliant. Great. So a quick recap for anyone who has just joined, who just answered the question about studying modules that you maybe haven't studied before in school, and the answer is that you absolutely can do that. So if you are watching this, strongly encouraged. That's good to know. If you are watching this after the live event, do scroll back and you can find out more about that. What we'll do now is I will mention that there are a couple of links I'd like to suggest if you're interested in university and looking at what the living side is like. We've got a resource called the Piggy Bank. This not only tells you about student finance, but it tells you about, it gives you money advice for things after school that you might need to know a little bit about. And you can find this online at www.thepiggybank.org. So Jacqueline's going to put that in the comments below, but do explore that because you can find out sort of the living side of university as well as the studying side. So it's good to know all the things. But for now, we'll move on to our next question. Next one we've got coming up. And it's an interestingly worded one. It's, how competitive is the application process to your subject?
So at Lancaster, I suppose the briefest way of saying, so our standard offer is 2 A's and a B, or the equivalent of 2 A's and a B at the A level. We do get many more times the number of applicants than we take, around between 130 and 150 students. So yes, it is competitive. And one of the things I suppose applicants need to think about on their UCAS when they make the 5 choices is having a sort of a combination of potential offers. And that's something that, again, I strongly advise seeking advice in school, but also out of school directly from universities about, would you recommend I make an application here? Will I get an offer? Don't be in any way intimidated, and feel free to contact us and say, these are my GCSEs, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Should I apply?
I think it's important to note that these people are here to help, because I know when I was applying to university, I wouldn't have sort of thought just to contact the university until I visited one and people, gave the opportunity to ask some questions. So it's important to know that you can ask these questions. These people are here to help, and using all the opportunities in school and outside of school to explore a little bit more about the application process.
Absolutely. So although it's competitive, we are also keen to have the widest variety of talented and bright people applying to the university. So do feel free to contact us directly. Yeah,
and I think what you mentioned there reminds me of what we spoke about last week in our Facebook Live session with Michael Greeny, and it was talking about how there's competitiveness on both sides there. Like at the university, the student maybe wants to get to the university, but equally the university wants you. So it's just knowing that there's both sides of the story, isn't it? Great. If you have just joined us, we've just been chatting a little bit about the application process, and we talked a little bit about your entry requirements there. So I think you can find that online on the history study page, which Jacqueline's already put on. So do explore that. I think we have got a question about entry requirements coming up, but we'll see what's next. It could be this. Here we go, that's it. So what subjects would you expect applicants to study? So you mentioned that the entry requirements were they AAB? Was that? Yeah. And are there specific subjects needed for that?
Well, we don't ask for history A level. Unusually. The vast majority of our applicants do have or are taking an A level in history, but we don't require it. There's no... I suppose that most of our applicants will have a selection of largely humanities subjects. We're always delighted if we see languages, they're very, very welcome. But we occasionally see a mixture of arts and sciences, and again, that's extremely welcome. One of our research strengths is in both history of science, but also in digital humanities. So to have students with a lively interest in quantitative methods, in issues around data, programming, these are very, very welcome in the Department of History too. So I wouldn't say there's a set of subjects that we would require.
So no set subjects then. No. That's quite unexpected, but then I guess it backs up the point that you were saying before that, I can't remember the way you worded it, but I think that the job of the teacher and the lecturers is to help those students sort of seeing a certain subject from scratch. So, you expect people to come in sort of with a fresh slate in a sense.
What we ask is sort of an interest in the subject, a determination to work and to do independent work. But yes, it's our jobs to sort of set out clearly unfamiliar historical terrain and unfamiliar geographies and topographies and names. But as I said before, history is very much a discipline of evidence, of argument, of communication, of analysis, and those our students gradually hone over the 3 years, and they get better and better and better at that, and can apply it to a greater variety of contexts.
Yeah, that was much more perfectly worded there. I was like, I'm glad you recapped on that. Brilliant. I have seen in the bowl that we've got one last question coming up, but I think it branches out into a lot of different questions and answers that might come up. So if you have just joined us, we've just been chatting a little bit about studying history at university. We're sat here with Deborah Sutton at Lancaster University, so if you do have any questions about that, do send them in our way. But for now, we've got one here, which is what are your previous students doing now, and what successes have previous alumni had?
Gosh, our students go on to do all sorts of things. One of the most common, although this in itself is very open-ended, is to do further study. So that could be a professional qualification, so to enter into teaching. I think few of our students end up being teachers than perhaps originally intended to, and there are opportunities to gain work experience in schools during the degree. Another set of students will go off and do professional qualifications, say in law, so a legal conversion. And history is a very, very solid subject to begin with, to go and apply for legal conversion courses, train to become an accountant. There's a set of professions they enter, so the civil service. So the world's their oyster, really, in terms of, and then there's the sort of graduate employers to go into kind of industry and business.
Yeah.
So a huge number of different careers and options. I mean, I think with a history degree, it very often takes 3 years or so for students to sort of find a graduate destination, to settle on something.
Yeah, that's interesting. Would you expect students applying to the course, do they tend to know what kind of career they're going for, or what do you find?
I think, yes, they'll sometimes have, I mean, the students who come here are wonderful and very bright and are very determined, and so very often they'll have thought through what's next.
Okay.
But I think what they find is that can be very different when they actually graduate after their third year. So teaching, I think, is very often understood to be a kind of a safe bet. I'll go and become a history teacher very often because, like me, they really liked and were influenced by their own history teacher. They think, right, that's what I want to do. But I think very often they take all sorts of very different opportunities. They don't necessarily do what they expected.
Yeah. They maybe find, like a lot of students, once they get into the subject, they realise the world is their oyster, there's plenty of things they can go into. And that's talking a little bit about the transferable skills that we touched upon earlier in this session. I don't know, what would you think are the main transferable skills that come out of this, that have meant those students can go onto law conversion courses, or they can go on to further study? What do you think those skills are?
I think by third year, an excellent capacity to organise time during the week, self-motivated research, time management in terms of preparation, the execution of work and deadlines, submissions, being proud of work that they've created. Again, an essay isn't just answering a question. It's creating, it's having an authorial voice and feeling proud of an analysis of a piece of research, of the outcome of research. So our students, our graduates, are excellent verbal communicators. Being able to express themselves succinctly, both in speech and in writing, being able to extract significant information, and employers need you to do that, sort of go away and conduct very quick research and produce a report. That's something that a history graduate should be really, really good at. And excellent skills of analysis, of intelligent critical reading. That history is described as the most sceptical of all disciplines.
Okay.
That there isn't a claim that we don't look sideways at and think about, well, okay, what's the context in which that statement is made? Who's making that? Who are they hoping to influence through that? So I think superb skills of critical reading, of the assemblage of clear evidence and arguments. Those
can
would
take
be the skills.
Brilliant.
And graduate employers are really looking for that.
Great. And I know a lot of those things that people are maybe starting to see now, sort of in school, those communication and looking at those things, but university. Studying history at uni is their chance to just expand that in different contexts, isn't it? And get so much better at that. Brilliant. Great. So we're coming up to sort of the end of our session now. That's the end of our questions. I'd like to thank you so much for coming here today to answer all these questions. It's brilliant. So for anyone who is watching after this is live, Jacqueline's been putting all those links below. So if you do see those mentioned, you can click on those and just find out more. Do you have any sort of last pieces of advice for people who might be watching this? So that's people in school. Do you have any last comments or anything?
Gosh, I
would
would
pressure now.
do think very carefully about coming and studying history. And perhaps history in combination with something else. It's an absolutely fascinating discipline, which creates all sorts of sort of subsequent opportunities. And it's fascinating. You get to study these extraordinary sort of corners of human experience and past, those known, those less well known. So yeah, it's a pleasurable way to spend 3 years.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, if you're going to spend 3 years studying something, make
do
it
something you enjoy.
Yeah, great. I don't want to end on anything else but that. That's a perfect nugget of information there. Great, so we will be doing Facebook Lives for the rest of the week, so tune in tomorrow again, and we'll be looking at studying medicine, so that's at 4 p.m. Once again, thanks Deborah for coming along, and we'll see you next time.